Mara wakes up before dawn. The dim light of the rising sun filters through the thin curtains of her small apartment. The soft sound of a radio in the background breaks the morning silence. She sits at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and staring at a photo of her mother and younger sister on the wall. For her, that image was more than a memory. It was a reminder of why she moved forward every day, despite the difficulties. His day started early and ended late. As a waitress in a restaurant frequented by the city's elite, Mara was used to dealing with looks of superiority, whispered comments, and the weight of prejudice, always disguised as formality. But she was strong. She knew that every challenge was an opportunity to prove to herself that she would not be defined by circumstances. She believed, somewhere deep in her heart, that her life was destined for something greater. The restaurant where Mara worked was a meeting place for wealthy women, powerful businessmen, and public figures. She was just one of the many employees who made that environment work perfectly. But for many of the customers, she didn't even exist. Her precise and discreet movements made her almost invisible. And this, most of the time, worked in her favor. That day, like any other, Mara went to the restaurant. As soon as he entered, he felt the oppressive environment. The tables were full, and the city's elite were already taking their seats. Among the customers, a group of women caught his attention. They laughed loudly, wore expensive clothes, and had an aura of ostentation that seemed to demand attention from everyone around them. It was a well-known group of rich women, led by Amanda, a famous socialite in the city. From the moment Mara approached to take their order, she felt the look of disdain. The muffled laughter began as soon as they saw her approaching. Amanda, with a cold smile on her face, made the first comment. She looked Mara up and down, examining her appearance critically, as if she were evaluating something of little value. "It seems like anyone can work here nowadays, right?" said Amanda, her voice thick with sarcasm. The other women laughed in unison, as if it were a common joke between them. Mara remained calm. She had been through this before. She knew her work required patience. But above all, she knew she couldn't let it get her down. He took the order kindly, ignoring the cutting looks and evil laughs. Shortly afterwards, while serving the table, Amanda pretended to knock over the glass of wine, causing the liquid to spill across the table. The expression on her face was that of someone who was having fun with the situation. Without hesitation, Amanda threw the crumpled napkin towards Mara and, with a mischievous smile, said, "Clean this up for me, honey. I bet you're used to dealing with messes." The entire group laughed once again. The humiliation was evident. Mara bent down to clear the table, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze around her. She could feel the tears threatening to escape, but she refused to cry. There was something inside her that was beyond that humiliation, a strength that no one there seemed to see. As she cleaned up the wine spill, something changed inside Mara. The women's laughter, which had once sounded like sharp blades, suddenly seemed distant, almost irrelevant. She realized that what those women did had nothing to do with her. It was a reflection of themselves, of the insecurity and emptiness they tried to fill with status and power. Standing up slowly, Mara looked directly at Amanda. There was no anger in his eyes, just a silent firmness. Amanda expected a different reaction, perhaps submission, perhaps revolt. But Mara just stared at her for a moment, took a deep breath, and continued with her work, as if the words and actions at that table no longer had any power over her. As he walked away, the feeling of humiliation began to give way to something deeper. Mara understood that her strength was not in the response she could give to those women, but in the way she chose to deal with it. They tried to put her down, but they couldn't. His dignity was intact. Mara knew that, deep down, rich women were prisoners of their own vanity, and she, despite her situation, was free. Did you like this inspiring story? Subscribe to the channel now, and don't miss any more journeys of overcoming like this one. Here, you will find stories that transform. Don't miss out. After that meeting, Mara felt that something inside her had changed. The humiliations that had previously left her small and made her question her worth now seemed less heavy. The contempt and prejudice that the rich women demonstrated in front of everyone, instead of breaking her, only strengthened her conviction that her life would be much greater than any sneer. In the following days, Mara continued to work at the restaurant with the same dedication as always. But something inside her pushed her to seek more. Every order he wrote down, every tray he carried, was accompanied by thoughts of how he could transform his reality. She no longer had time for doubts. There was no more room to feel inferior. What she wanted now was to act. Without anyone knowing, Mara began dedicating her free time to studying, something she hadn't done since she was very young. He started going to the city's public library, where he stayed for hours after work. Her hands handled books on economics, administration, and entrepreneurship, while her mind opened to a world of possibilities that she had previously never even imagined were within her reach. At first, she felt out of place in that environment of silence and knowledge. The people around her, university students and successful professionals, seemed to have far more opportunities and resources than she ever had. But little by little, Mara realized that it didn't matter where she came from or how long she had spent without studying. What really mattered was your willpower, your ability to learn and fight for a different future. As I read, ideas began to emerge. Mara remembered the rich women who humiliated her. He remembered their inane conversations about fashion, travel, and investments. The contrast between the luxury these women lived in and the reality she faced every day seemed like an insurmountable barrier. But Mara knew she could cross it in a way no one would ever expect. What they used to humiliate her, she would use to rise up. Time passed, and while rich women continued to frequent the restaurant, Mara secretly made her own plans. She carefully observed their behavior. The way they talked about investments and business awakened something in her that she had never considered. What if she became an entrepreneur herself? She knew it wouldn't be easy. But that idea started to grow, and the more she thought about it, the more real it became. One night, after a long shift at the restaurant, Mara was about to leave when she overheard a conversation in the dining room between two of the women who had mocked her. They were talking about a business opportunity, something related to creating a clothing brand aimed at high society women. The contempt with which they spoke of ordinary women made Mara's blood boil. But it also ignited something else, an opportunity. The idea that had been maturing in his mind was consolidated in that instant. She would launch her own clothing brand. But unlike the superficiality and exclusivity promoted by rich women, her brand would have a greater purpose. It would be inclusive, accessible, and represent all women who, like her, needed strength to face daily difficulties. Women who were often ignored or belittled, but who carried immense power with them. Mara knew the path would not be easy. She had no capital, no influential contacts. But what she did have was courage, and that would be enough. With the little money she managed to save from her waitress salary, she started investing in the idea. He did research, got in touch with small local factories, and started designing his first pieces during the early hours of the morning. She also sought to learn about the market, about how to launch a brand and make her voice heard among so many others. Mara's effort was silent but tireless. During the day, she continued to smile and be helpful at the restaurant. At night, she became a potential strategist and businesswoman, shaping the future she so desired. The women who humiliated her had no idea that the waitress, whom they treated with such disdain, was about to transform their own lives in an unimaginable way. Mara knew that the real victory would not be open revenge or a public humiliation of rich women. The biggest twist would be the success she would achieve with her efforts, without having to put anyone down to move up. Her focus was clear. She wanted to grow, but with integrity and dignity, and by doing so, it would also inspire other women to believe in themselves, no matter how many people told them they weren't capable. The hard work started to pay off. Mara began to receive support from women who, like her, had faced challenges and prejudices. His brand, still embryonic, began to gain notoriety among common people, and when she least expected it, something surprising happened. One of the most exclusive events in the city, attended by the same rich women who humiliated her, decided to support initiatives by local entrepreneurs. Mara's brand was selected to be featured. Fate seemed to have taken an unbelievable turn. The waitress who had been looked down upon was now about to present her own creation in front of the same people who had laughed at her. Not as a servant, but as a strong and successful businesswoman. The big day has finally arrived. The city was buzzing, and the exclusive event that brought together the local elite promised to be one of the most talked about nights of the year. Preparations were complete, and the luxurious hall, where local brands would be showcased, was decorated with sophistication. However, among all the exhibitors and guests, one person's story in particular was about to stand out. Mara, who had previously been invisible to many, was now on the verge of an unbelievable transformation. That morning, she woke up with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Seeing your clothing brand recognized at such an important event was a feat that, until recently, seemed unattainable. And to think that she was about to present her work in front of the same women who humiliated her made her mind spin with a mix of emotions. When Mara entered the room, she felt the eyes of many on her, now no longer as a waitress, but as someone of equal importance in that space. There was an air of surprise among the organizers and guests, many of whom were used to seeing her wait tables and not be on the main stage. But at that moment, she was no longer on the sidelines. It was exactly where it was supposed to be. The rich women, the same ones who had mocked her in the restaurant, were present at the event. Amanda, always arrogant, was accompanied by her friends, all excited about the glamour of the night. They hadn't noticed Mara yet, but that would change soon. When the announcement of Mara's performance was made, the hall fell silent. She took the stage with confidence, wearing one of her own creations, an elegant, modern ensemble that reflected both her identity and the message she wanted to convey. Mara was living proof that true strength and style came from within. She started talking about the brand, explaining her vision. His words were simple but powerful. He talked about inclusion, about creating clothes that represented all women, no matter their status or origin. He said that his brand was for those who fought, who rose in the face of challenges, and who, despite adversity, never lost hope. "I am one of those women," she said, looking directly at the audience. "Like many of you, I was once underestimated. But what defines me is not what they said or thought of me, but what I chose to do with it." Mara's words reverberated throughout the room. There was a murmur among the guests, and expressions of surprise were evident. Amanda, who until then had not realized who the woman on stage was, suddenly widened her eyes when she recognized Mara. She exchanged quick glances with her friends, clearly uncomfortable. The disdain and arrogance he previously displayed seemed to have disappeared. The impact of seeing Mara there, as a businesswoman and creator of a successful brand, was a shock for Amanda. The waitress that she and her friends had treated with such contempt was now in the spotlight, being applauded and admired by everyone around. And most surprising of all, Mara showed no resentment or desire for revenge. His victory was in the simple fact of having conquered his space on his own merit. As Mara continued her presentation, receiving a standing ovation from those present, Amanda could not hide her discomfort. She knew Mara had won in a way she could never understand, with dignity, hard work, and a strength that money could never buy. Mara's success did not come with revenge or public humiliation of rich women. On the contrary, her true turning point was in silent overcoming, in transforming her reality, and creating something that transcended the superficiality that those women so valued. Mara's brand represented everything they couldn't see: authenticity, courage, and the ability to lift others along with you. At the end of the presentation, Mara received praise from business people and investors interested in supporting her brand. Local media swarmed her for interviews, wanting to know more about her story and how she had come so far. But Mara knew that this victory was not just hers. She represented every woman who had ever been humiliated, underestimated, but who chose to rise up and move forward. As she left the stage, Amanda's eyes followed her. The socialite's expression was a mixture of shame and regret. But Mara didn't even care what she thought. For Mara, true victory was not in proving something to those who despised her, but in proving herself to herself. She had turned the humiliation into fuel, and the result was clear. Mara was now stronger than any of those rich women had ever imagined. After the event, Mara's life changed completely. Recognition of her clothing brand quickly spread, not just across the city, but beyond. His work was celebrated for its originality, purpose, and the social impact it promoted. She began to be invited to lectures, television programs, and interviews, where she shared her journey, from humiliated waitress to successful businesswoman. But despite all the success and attention, Mara remained the same person she always was, determined, humble, and full of empathy. She never forgot where she came from, nor the struggles she faced to get there. On the contrary, she made a point of using her new position to help other women follow the same path. She created social initiatives to support young entrepreneurs from marginalized communities, offering opportunities and mentoring that she herself did not have. Mara knew her story was not unique. There were so many other women with incredible talents, but who were ignored or underestimated because of their color, origin, or social class. And it was exactly these women that she was fighting for now. Her brand wasn't just a fashion company. It was an empowerment movement. Each piece of clothing carried with it the message that, regardless of the difficulties faced, each woman had the power to change her story. One day, while walking through the city center, Mara crossed paths with Amanda, the socialite who led the humiliation at the restaurant months ago. The meeting was unexpected. Amanda, now without her entourage of friends around her, seemed like a different person. Her eyes avoided Mara's, and she hesitated for a moment, as if considering what to do. With a look of discomfort, Amanda finally stopped and, before Mara could continue on her way, approached. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for everything I did that day," Amanda said, her voice low and strained. "I was wrong." Mara looked at Amanda for a moment. That apology seemed sincere, but Mara knew she didn't need it to move forward. She had already forgiven herself, and had already overcome that moment long before any retraction. His response was calm, without rancor. "Don't worry, Amanda. Everything is fine now. I chose not to let that define me." Amanda was silent for a moment, not knowing how to respond. She seemed surprised by the lack of bitterness in Mara's words, as if she had expected a different reaction. Mara smiled softly, waved goodbye, and continued on her way, feeling at peace. "I knew I didn't need anyone's validation or regret to know who I was and what I had achieved." The real lesson of her journey was understanding that her worth was never in the hands of those who tried to diminish her. And now, his life was proof of that. Mara had turned pain and humiliation into strength, and used that strength to lift others up. Her story was no longer about revenge or an unexpected turn of events, but about the power of resilience, self-overcoming, and, above all, love for herself and others. As time passed, Mara's brand grew even more. She became an inspiration to so many other women who, like her, struggled against the obstacles that society placed in their path. His name became synonymous with courage and determination. But the most important thing for Mara was not material success, but the impact she had on other people's lives. In recent days, Mara received a letter from a young woman who had attended her lecture at a public school. The girl talked about how Mara's story had inspired her to follow her own dreams, even when everyone around her told her she would never be able to. She ended the letter by saying, "Thank you for showing me that, despite everything, I can do it." When Mara finished reading the letter, she smiled, with tears in her eyes. That was why she did what she did. If her story could transform even one person's life, then it had all been worth it. She knew that her journey of overcoming would never end. There would still be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, and new obstacles. But now, more than ever, Mara was sure she was capable of facing anything. Her life, which once seemed so limited by circumstances, had become an example that, with love, resilience, and courage, it is possible to transform even the greatest adversities into extraordinary achievements. Mara had become much more than a successful businesswoman. She was, for so many people, a true inspiration.